and welcome to the
Hey,
Doofcast.
everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Doofcast. I'm your normal host, Michael, and joining me today is Doofcaster Master Blaster, Scott Daly. Scott, say hello.
Hello. Why does
And
this
of course, Maddie Matterson. Matt?
Yeah.
And we're all
Thanks
here
for-
today to talk about the seventh of the set of good movies of all times, the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. Scott, why is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves better than Citizen Kane? Go.
Well, it has an infinity number of dragons more than Citizen Kane. So
That's a true fact. But Matt, do you think that perhaps the use of the dragon symbolizes something more about the nature of humanity and the conflict that rests between us all?
No, I don't.
Good.
oh my gosh. Okay, so yes, this week on the show we are going to be talking about the movie Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. Michael, we're so glad to have you back on the show. It's been too long since you just ripped the introduction away from me. And,
Thank you. Yes,
took control of the podcast.
I've been missing that, but there hasn't been a movie worth talking about since the last time I was on.
See.
So I'm pleased to be back this time to talk about this movie.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking all about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. I think we're going to finish up the episode talking about some TV, but that doesn't matter. Let's get into our main segment. Let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves.
Truth be told, we helped the wrong person steal the wrong thing. We didn't mean to unleash the greatest evil the world has ever known. But we're gonna fix it.
So how do we pull that off? Figure it out over a drink?
Probably best.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers embark on an epic quest to retrieve a lost relic, but things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people.
This movie was written by John Francis Daley, Jonathan Goldstein, and Michael Giolo. It is directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein and stars Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, and Hugh Grant. All right, Michael, I will allow you to get into it. This is you stated the seventh good movie. If anyone remembers Michael's last visit to the Doofcast, he loudly and probably incorrectly claimed that there were only 6 good movies, and you've added a new one to the list. So talk to me about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, well, it's rare that a new movie gets added to the list, but this was a good movie with depth, but also a movie on the list has to be, both technically good, which this was, but also fun to watch, such that you could watch it multiple times and not get annoyed. And this fulfilled both of those criteria.
Okay.
You haven't told me what you thought about it yet, though, which is what I've been waiting for.
Oh yeah. It's coming. But first, let's go over to Matt and get Matt's overall opinion on Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves.
I'll briefly reiterate what I kind of said at the bookend of our last episode, which is that
Sure.
I felt like I understood why Michael said it was one of the 7 good movies, which is just basically very solid execution across the board in terms of storytelling, in terms of performances, in terms of pacing. It's funny. You care about the characters. Each of the characters has a dramatic arc that is executed competently. It's one of those. It's just one of those movies where you walk away from it and you're like, yeah, that was like one of the movies of my childhood where I could find nothing wrong with it. And
although this wasn't technically a video game movie, it was kind of a video game movie, which are always bad. And this completely broke that rule that movies based on video games are always bad. Because this movie was made by people who liked Dungeons and Dragons. Like most of these movies are made cynically, because it's like, it's popular right now, Dungeons and Dragons. Let's pay someone to make that movie. But it seemed like everyone involved in this movie, loved Dungeons and Dragons except Hugh Grant, and that was fine because he was the villain.
I mentioned John Francis Daley as the director / writer of this film.
No relation.
No relation. He spells it wrong. He actually, I don't know if you guys ever watched the show Freaks and Geeks, the one season Judd Apatow show that came on in the 2000s, I think. He played one of the nerdy characters in Freaks and Geeks, and they played Dungeons and Dragons in that show all the time. And he went on to be a pretty successful Hollywood writer. He wrote Spider-Man: Homecoming. He wrote some other movies I'm blanking on right now, but this was his baby, really. He wrote and directed this one, and obviously very passionate about both D&D and this movie.
Yeah,
Um,
I think Michelle Rodriguez also played Dungeons and Dragons, and I think Chris Pine at least played a little bit. I don't know how into it he was, but they all
my
seemed
understanding
to
is the whole
enjoy it.
cast got together and played a session of D&D as
Yeah.
their characters together
Oh,
before filming started.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I think we've all played D&D quite a bit. Michael, I think you are probably the most studious and knowledgeable person when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons out of the three of us, for sure. Um, and I really want to get into that with you in this movie, because I think the ways in which it honors the game without getting like
Yeah.
too caught up into
Yeah.
this detail of it is really interesting.
Well, so the first thing I think they did really well, and the other, so there have been other Dungeons and Dragons movies that most people might not have seen.
The one in the 90s that was just awful.
Yeah, and then
With the Wayne's brother.
there was a Sci-Fi Channel original movie sequel to it, or I don't know if it was
Oh.
officially sequel. There was another Dungeons and Dragons movie that was a sci-fi original movie, like in the early 2000s.
I missed that one.
And the thing that's bad about these movies, well, there's more than one thing, but when you try to do like a Dungeons and Dragons movie, sometimes like you're too focused on thinking that the reason people like Dungeons and Dragons is either like A, because of complicated world lore, or B, because just like magic and dragons and action. And this movie didn't fall in any of those traps, because it really didn't spend any time like trying to explain to you a complicated political situation. It just kind of jumped right into like what was going on with the characters, and it definitely referenced a lot of things in D&D, but it wasn't in a like, hey, look what we just did sort of way. It was just like, yeah, they just pulled from it to build what was going on.
Totally. I agree.
And that was good. And then the other thing that they did well, that really they needed to do for a Dungeons and Dragons movie, was make it a heist comedy.
Yeah.
Because those are the two fun things about Dungeons and Dragons, because people make the same mistakes playing Dungeons and Dragons that they do making Dungeons and Dragons movies, which is like in their head, they think that maybe the funnest thing to do would have a super dramatic adventure that's really serious and like makes everyone in the party cry. But actually, the most fun way to play Dungeons and Dragons is when everyone's being a bit silly and laughing and having a good time, which was happening in this movie. And then like a cool Dungeons and Dragons like session is not one where there's an epic battle, but one where there's like really fun creative problem solving, like you have to steal something from a vault and use a hither thither staff and et cetera, et cetera. And then things go wrong and you have to improvise, and all of those things were like how the movie was designed. So this was an elevated form of art that encapsulated the perfect D&D adventure into the perfect D&D movie.
I agree in that I think the movie does a very good job of capturing what it's like to play Dungeons and Dragons, including the part where your players just start acting like fucking idiots and screwing everything up, and like everyone else has to like warp themselves around one character's choice and go, oh fuck, what did you do? Okay, we got to figure out what to do next. It very much did feel like watching people play an actual D&D session, and I think that's great. I think this is a good movie. I enjoyed this movie overall. I'm kind of shocked you liked it as much as you did, though, Michael, because I really thought that you hated the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
And I do hate the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
This is just an MCU movie with Dungeons and Dragons layered on top of it. Like, that is the blueprint of this film.
I don't think Marvel properties were referenced.
No, they didn't reference them directly, but this is like it is the template of a Marvel movie with Dungeons and Dragons on top of it.
I don't think so, because Marvel movies, like, here are some differences. Marvel movies lack tension. There doesn't seem to be any stakes.
That's wrong. Okay.
To like the conflict in a Marvel movie. And also, like, the humor was good in this one.
Okay. Okay. I mean, you can't just make like declarative. Like, it is a movie. It is a movie about a cast of characters
I
coming
feel like
together that has
I
snarky
feel like
jokes and over the top
Marvel movies
action sequences. It is. It is. This is a Marvel movie.
Marvel movies are the humor in a Marvel movie is like quips that aren't funny in the middle of combat.
That's
whereas,
oh my god, that's
whereas like the humor in this movie was more situational. Like there were like occasional quips, but they weren't Joss Whedon-esque quips, which is important. But that's not why it was funny. It was more like the complications of the scenarios that were funny. Like in the beginning when they're like building up like how they're gonna escape the tower, and he keeps asking about the one guy who it turns out like doesn't even know them, but they just wanted to push the Aarakocra out the window so that it could use its wings to like, you know, get out. Like that was like a joke that was like set up and well executed, and it paid off.
Yeah,
and
it was a great
doesn't
joke.
happen in Marvel movies. There's no payoff in Marvel
that's
movies.
just not true. But I mean, like,
Yeah.
I that's just not like I swear to God, when people sat around a table discussing this movie, one of the things they said is we need to make it kind of like a Marvel movie. We need to make it these really fast-paced action sequences.
This is like the antithesis of a Marvel movie.
Oh my God, Matt, please back me up on this.
Matt,
I mean, it
back
does
me up on
end.
this.
Well, so what I said to you, Scott, is it's not a blue laser that shoots into the sky that they have to rush to save the city from. It's a red laser they shoot into the sky that they have to rush to save the city from. It's totally different. So
here's the other thing, though. Here's the other thing is that in a Marvel movie, it's all about heroes who are like trying to save the world the whole time, which as you know, Scott, is like too big of a scale for me to care about. Whereas in this movie, it was actually all just about like, you know, Chris Pine's like family issues and like trying to get his wife back and trying to get his daughter back, and also, you know, they're while being kind of selfish thieves, and then at the end they do decide to turn back and like save the world because they've all learned lessons as people. Whereas like that only
like
ever
the
happens
Guardians of the Galaxy.
That only ever happens. Yeah, well, the Guardians of the Galaxy is probably the best example of a Marvel movie. But like this only ever happens in like the first of a Marvel movie, and then the sequels, it's like, where do you go from there? It's like, okay, yeah, they got to save the world because they're the good guy, and they're gonna fight, but they can't get hurt because they're superheroes. Blah, blah, blah.
I mean,
I don't deny that you're right there, but I think my point stands that the template of this movie was let's do Dungeons and Dragons Marvel-esque. I mean, I don't want to belabor this point too much because there's plenty to talk about here.
I would concede that there are similarities between Guardians of the Galaxy, but when I think of a Marvel movie, I guess that's not what I thought of. I thought of like, Captain America and Thor and all that.
Yeah, no, I think obviously it's and look, I like this movie. I think everything that you've said so far is absolutely true. That this is a movie that understands what people care about when they play D&D. It understands what people care about when they go to movies.
Yes.
It has the fun action sequences. It has the fun jokes.
Whereas I don't understand what people care about when they read comic books. So maybe it's just a personal lack of resonance. But
well, yeah, I think there's just a wide variety of Marvel movies. Like I think Iron Man 1, for example, is a very well made movie, and that isn't necessarily a statement that I would make about every one of the subsequent movies after that movie. I think, as much fun as it is to hear you guys bicker like an old married couple, which it is, I think it just comes down to like this movie was really solidly executed, and the characters were very vivid, and the humor was well crafted and well done, and worked on many different levels, none of which were just here's a lazy quip like that was almost not present, right? It was more like the funniest thing to me, you were talking about the bird, like the funniest thing to me was that his name was Jarnathan, which is like exactly the kind of stupid made up name that a DM would pull out of his ass because he couldn't think of anything better. And so there's just like a bunch of stuff like that where you either it doesn't matter or you think it's kind of funny, or and then like you said, situational jokes about like they have the hither thither staff, And I don't know, just
The
it just works. Yeah.
one thing that everyone who plays D&D will find funny was the situation with the speak with dead spell, because I can't tell you how many times it's happened in my D&D group where it's like we cast speak with dead to learn something from someone who died, and we get like exactly 5 questions, and every time we accidentally like say something in question form, which happens more often than you think, like the dead person answers and that uses up one of our questions. um so
Very funny. I love that joke. I loved the callback to the joke. Like instead of doing a Marvel-esque end credit sequence, we just cut back to that one guy still in the graveyard, still saying, "Please, someone ask me one more question."
But the going back to the quality of the characters, which I think is important, is that like every character had their own like little arc that like they never dwelled on or made like too dramatic, but were effective. You know, like the barbarian lady who, it's been like a month since I've seen this movie, so what was her name?
Her name was
Michelle
Michelle
Rodriguez's
Rodriguez.
character.
Yeah, Rodriguez's name.
Holga.
I think the character's name was Holga. Yeah,
Holga. Like, you know, she was a good barbarian sidekick who wasn't like caricatured into like a too brutish of a person, but she did have the sort of barbarian like straightforwardness which worked. And she had that kind of nice you know, not being able to let go, you know, her former husband or boyfriend or whatever, you know, who was Bradley Cooper, who was kind of funny as a hobbit.
I love her has a thing for hobbits.
Yeah,
joke.
and
I thought that was so great.
And then like at the end when you know, Chris Pine realizes that like to his daughter, like his daughter's mom was really Holga, not her actual mom, and he uses the, you know, reincarnation thing to bring her back. It's like, that was a good moment. That all paid off. You could see him realize things. It was a human moment.
I think ultimately, like the reason this movie succeeds is because it just does a really good job at the fundamentals of storytelling. That it just understands innately, like what makes, and it's not doing anything super complicated. This isn't like like avant-garde storytelling. It's just very, very competent basic storytelling, and it succeeds at it for sure.
Yeah, and you care about everybody, right? Even I can imagine a lesser form of this movie where I just don't care about the sorcerer kid. I'm bored with the sorcerer kid. I you know, it's a distraction. And in this movie, like, no, I wanted to see sorcerer kid succeed. I was invested. I was invested in all of these side characters, and that is not something that happens accidentally. I mean, I think this is the kind of thing that we complain about all the time, honestly. Like whenever we talk about sort of action movies, is we'll be like, wow, you know, like I just wish I had cared. Like I wish they had bothered to put in the basic groundwork of character to make me care about what was happening. And this was a movie where they were like, all right, the most important thing is to make everybody care about the whole party, every one of these characters.
Yeah.
And they did that.
And it's not super hard either, is the frustrating part. Like it's not like Simon, which is the sorcerer character, it's not like his story is super complex and layered, right? He just has self-esteem issues. That's it. He is unsure of himself. That's it.
I like that. I don't like when movies get too pretentious. I just want them to be humble.
I mean, there's space for that in different types of movies, but a film like this, there's no room for that. Like, just make it simple, make it easy to understand, and let's go. And that's what I think this movie does very, very well with. And I think you're right, Matt. Every single character has something to hold on to that you care about with them. I think maybe the druid character is perhaps, I mean, she does get a little bit of backstory. You know, she's working towards saving her people, and doesn't like humans, and so is not getting along very well with them. But I think she has like the least fleshed out arc. And also, I played druids in D&D before. They have never been that cool. So
she was just really high level.
Yeah, they're only allowed to polymorph twice per day.
Yeah,
or wild shape, I guess, is what you would call it. But I think they had some complicated explanation for it rules wise but I don't. Also, like you're not actually allowed to wild shape into a owl bear. because it's not a beast. But
Ultimately, like the thing I love about it is none of this actually matters. That like
exactly,
for people that really like D&D, like us that have played it a lot, and like there's moments here where we all recognize things. Like I don't think the movie ever goes out of its way to like declare each of these characters
no,
classes, but
it
we
it
all
it
know
didn't
that,
pull an
she's the
X-Men.
barbarian, he's the
Yeah,
bard. Like we all
it
know
didn't.
that, and it throws names of D&D at us. You like Neverwinter, like we get names like that, and but a person like my wife who saw this with me that has only played D&D with us those handful of times where she played a red wizard. Basically she was a monster when she played with us. She's
It was
so
so good.
mean and evil.
She was great. Yeah, that was an awesome
But
adventure.
she was able to follow everything, and like it works. Like it was designed to appeal to people that really like this game, but it was also just to work as a movie for someone who maybe has never opened a player's manual at all ever.
Yeah, it didn't. Like what I really hate in movies based on other intellectual properties is like, in the Star Trek movies when they just like had to do all the catchphrases, like when
Yeah.
in the newer Star Trek movies, J.J. Abrams's, they just they had to do all the beam me up Scotties and whatever.
Oh, you
And
mean
it
when
was
Kirk yells Khan and the reveal that the guy's name is Khan, even though that doesn't matter in universe at all because nobody
yeah,
knows who that
it just
is?
feel like it breaks the fourth wall every time they do that because
Mm-hmm.
they're clearly just doing it to like get the audience to be like, I remember that. Or when they try to do like a pop culture reference, like in X-Men 3, when they're like, I'm the Juggernaut, bitch. That's all.
Which was
Just don't do that. This movie like never broke the fourth wall with regards to its D&D references.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true, and that I think that would have been extremely groan inducing if it had winked at the audience, like even a single time. That can be enough to kind of introduce that distance where you're like, oh, I just remembered these are all pretend characters. These are all actors playing characters. I don't care.
There were enough things to relate to that they didn't have to point out, like the fact that the paladin is kind of like a self-righteous prick that's annoying. It's just like, yeah, that's how paladins are.
So much. Yeah, I love that so much. That was great. And that guy, that was a smart casting for them. I think that brought a lot of people to this movie because that guy was apparently on like the first season of Bridgerton, and everyone was obsessed with him on that show. And then he quit after the first season, and so I think that was really smart casting of their part to bring people.
Also, I think Hugh Grant has really come into his own as a villain. Like he shouldn't be a romantic comedy lead. He should be like a foppish villain. That's just who he was born to play.
Hugh Grant is fascinating to me in this movie. He's incredible, and he's obviously like going for it in a lot of great ways. And it's astonishing to me because Michael, and at your screening, did they do the thing before the movie played where the whole cast was sitting there?
I was just about to bring it up, and Hugh Grant looks so annoyed to be there. Everyone else is like, hey, I'm happy you came to see the movie, and he's just like so annoyed.
Yeah.
And then they made him read the last line, and it's like never has a human being wanted to be doing something less than Hugh Grant wanted to be doing that thing.
Perfect intro in a way.
Yeah, it is. And yet, he's going for it in the movie, right? Like it's not like he's bringing that performance in that little spot into the film. Actor. He's going for it, and he's having fun with the character. And I agree with you. I think he's the villain in the Paddington movie, Paddington 2. And he's playing a similar kind of a villain in that, and he just commits to these roles. And
I think he's a villain in real life, from what I've heard.
Fair. Yeah.
But yeah, it was good. I was everyone was perfectly cast. Chris Pine is charming, but he definitely has like a fun side where he can make fun of himself. And
it definitely needs a person like that is willing to make himself look like an idiot in the role, because that's definitely what he plays. He's kind of the moron that is bumbling his way through the adventure. And I love that they kind of lampshade the idea that what does he do? What does he bring to this group? Yeah.
It's
maybe
interesting.
Not much.
I kind of find Chris Pine.
Mm-hmm.
I find him. I was just thinking, like, why do I find him more likable in this role than I did with him as Kirk? And I think it's as simple as like he's older. He's an older man, and his character is basically a failure. And there's
Yeah.
something very likable and in a sense relatable about like being a middle-aged failure.
Yeah.
And there's
Whereas,
something a lot less relatable about being just like a young um hot hero
yeah,
guy. You're just
the
like there's
only
nothing to connect
captain who
to.
passed the Kobayashi Maru test, like
Yeah, right.
Kirk never makes fun of himself in that movie. Like he's just
Yeah,
supposed to be like a cool, ladies' man, good captain.
Yeah. Which of
yeah.
it was so fascinating. I mean, I don't want to turn this into a whole conversation about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, but like it's certainly true that like the hot-headed, arrogant, like sex maniac is part of who the Captain Kirk character was in the original series. But that's like only one facet of who he was, and that seems like that's the only facet that we played up in that movie. It's like
Mhm.
that's the only beat we're gonna
Yeah.
hit for Chris
Yeah.
Pine's
Well,
Kirk.
I don't think like the people who made that movie like loved Star Trek. Like
No.
I think that was more of like I don't know if it was was it the other Abranoff or whoever who wrote
It
it?
was J.J.
Or
Abrams and the other guy who I hate. What's his
yeah,
name?
but
No,
I think
Lindelof had nothing to do with it. Stop
Lindelof.
blaming
Okay, I
I was
Lindelof
gonna
for
say
these
like
left on the list.
whoever wrote it, it felt more like they were bored with the original Star Trek and were like, let's redo it as like a fast-paced action thing.
Yeah.
It,
Well,
it didn't feel like it was made by people who loved it like this movie and D&D.
which is kind of a shock with this movie, right? Because I mean, this is from a studio perspective a cynical ploy to
Yeah.
mine franchise material, intellectual property to make money, and yet the people they put in charge of it are people that understood
Right.
why the property is great and
Yeah.
showed passion towards it and created something good. So I mean, I think this movie is an example of how good art can be created in that system.
I wonder if that was just like a happy accident or it was somehow more deliberate because this does very rarely happen. I mean, like with all of the new Star Wars movies, like how many people out there love Star Wars and then like look what happened to the dang, movies. It didn't feel like it was made by people who liked Star Wars at all.
I mean, I think there's like Dungeons and Dragons kind of exists in this happy middle ground where it's like known and beloved, but it's not big enough, to where like every single person like, oh, we
Yeah.
got possible billions of dollars in this thing, and so we need to make sure it hits
Pretty
all four
big right
quadrants
now.
perfectly.
It's I think it might be Wizards like biggest moneymaker now.
I mean, yeah, but that's like relative, right? Like this is like
Well, like relative to like
compare.
Magic the Gathering, that's a lot of money. It's
Well,
pretty
yeah,
popular.
but not relative to like the typical IP that these big studios are pushing. I mean, like this movie is doing well, but I think it's like 200 million. I mean, it's not like it's
Yeah,
making money, and they're probably going to make a sequel to it because it's making enough money. But like, it's not like destroying the world like a thing like the Mario movie is, because like that's IP that has so
that
much potential
I,
and investment in it that people are going to get involved. I just feel like D&D sits in this
I
perfect
guess
middle
so, yeah.
ground where like you let a guy like John Francis Daly like do his thing, and understand that he's a guy that really loves this property, and because one of the things they did with this movie is there's a lot of practical effects in it. Like obviously it's a huge CG movie, there's tons of CGI everywhere, but a lot of the stuff is practical too. A lot of the sets are practical. As you guys said, the bird guy and the dragonborn those are practical effects, and it is this wonderful marriage of the two types of special effects that I think makes it feel like more than just a bunch of people sitting in a
Yeah.
big blue
Well,
room.
it didn't feel like they were trying to be impressive with their special effects, which I appreciate. Like, in Marvel movies, they really try to wow you with like the big scenes and the, whatever
Yeah.
massive.
Even though Marvel's
CGI-generated
having an
things.
issue right now where
Is
they
it?
just fired their person that manages all the special effects stuff, and it's the big mess.
But yeah, I
Interesting.
mean, they're obviously like, when the dragon is chasing them, that's obviously involves a lot of CGI.
Yeah,
But
I mean every shot has CG in it. Like, but I mean, like I'm
yeah,
not saying like CG
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
inherently bad,
No,
but like the marriage of practical and digital is I think a testament to the care that they went for in these movies.
yes, in the seventh good movie.
Yeah, it looks like the budget was about 150 million, which is which is substantially lower than the budget of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So I tell you,
Is that really the name of?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
But so I guess I just say that to say, like, it's going to do pretty well. It's going to make its money back, I would guess. It was regarded positively, so they should I don't know. It's funny because we sort of, without even realizing it, segued into talking about, like, and then they can boot up a franchise, and which is funny because I'm like, I don't
want
I'm
a
just
sequel.
Yeah, I'm just happy that this movie was good and that it's going to make its money back. That's which at this point in history is not guaranteed, because movies in the last 2 or 3 years have been doing very poorly in general.
It does surprise me they spent $150 million on this movie, though. I'm surprised a studio was willing to throw that much money into what is a relative risky proposition. You know, they've released Dungeons and Dragons movies before, and they did not make money.
Well,
so
I don't know if you guys realize, like, how popular Dungeons and Dragons is now. Like, all of my students play Dungeons and Dragons. There's like a club on campus that has like 30 groups going or something like that, and I'm not at a very big school. Like, actually, like, a lot of people play it now.
I mean, I think, like, it's still like a niche property relative to the population of the world. Like, 179 million is impressive, but it's not huge.
Well, I think this is kind of a thing we were talking about the other day when it comes to, like, untapped reservoirs of fandom, where maybe at a certain point, so like, it wasn't surprising to us that Mario made a bunch of money, because it's like, there hasn't been a Mario movie in forever, and the only one there was not really a Mario movie. So, like, everybody's going to go see it. And are you going to go see Marvel movie number 30? No, I'm kind of good. You know, like, even if you like the Marvel movies, you're not just going to rush out. And so there's all these other things that are popular, and they have a reservoir of fandom, and this is like a perfect candidate for that. And you know, corollary to that, if you make 5 more of these movies, I would expect them to do progressively worse and worse, because that fandom has now been addressed. So what you should really do is you should move on to the next thing. Actually, we should make a bunch of different movies about different properties if we're going to try to do it this way.
And honestly, to me, this is a testament that the Marvel formula works. And the problem that the MCU is having at the moment is that it just has diminishing returns over time. This is kind of how everything in this world works. You just get tired of it, and you can kind of take the same idea and drop it in a new universe with new characters and new ideas, and it re-energizes it and shows that people aren't sick of the formula. They're just sick of that execution of the formula. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the wrong lesson to take from this movie would be, all right, let's get up number 2. Let's go. I mean, I think there's plenty more storytelling you can do in this world. I kind of think my personal thing would be, if it's going to be true to Dungeons and Dragons, then if a sequel to this movie must exist, let's not roll back the same characters. Let's do a new adventure with a new cast.
Yeah, I agree with you. That would be the best way to do it. But I don't think the studio will do that. They'll be like, oh, we got to bring back Chris Pine. We got to bring back Michelle Rodriguez. Like, not really understanding why people liked this movie, but just like hoping to, like, you know, sell characters they can make action figures for or whatever.
Yeah.
I really did not expect to like Michelle Rodriguez in this movie, by the way. I think that's entirely because
I feel like Michelle Rodriguez gets a lot of crap that she doesn't deserve, but go on.
I don't know. I don't dislike her. I just think, like, I feel like she's been playing the same character for 20 years. And that's fine. But I just kind of like, can we do something else here? And so I was kind of surprised at the way she worked on me in this movie. Because she is, in my opinion, playing the same character she's been playing for 20 years in this movie as well.
She kind of does. I mean, she's kind of like one of those, who is a good example of an actor who kind of always plays the same thing, but is still really good at it?
Harrison Ford.
Yeah, like Harrison Ford is a great example, actually. It's the perfect example. And she does kind of play a certain character, but like she's good at it, and also she's kind of one of the few like female actresses who kind of like really good at pulling off this kind of like tough guy personality. I
Mhm.
find that she's always good at that, and
Yeah.
there's not a lot of other actresses who I've seen pull it off as well.
Yeah, I think the way she does it, it's downplayed. It's not overwrought. It's just like she's
Right.
a real. So like you could believe this is a
Yeah, totally.
person who behaves this way. I liked. I mean, I think a great moment for her character was this really stuck with me for some reason. Is like Chris Pine makes some sarcastic quip at her expense, and she just kind of she said like seriously but casually. She just replies, "Don't mock me." And it like and I thought that was great because like another performer might have gone like "Don't mock me," or like if you're with your friends at the D&D table, that's the line read you might have gotten. But like her just kind of like calmly but firmly setting that boundary of like, don't talk to me that way, and then we move on from that moment, and it's not weird. It's just like, I don't know, just that jumped out to me as like an opportunity where she could have gone big and she went small, and it worked really well for me.
I think the nicest thing I could say about her is that she's an actress that completely understands that sometimes her mere presence is enough, and so she doesn't have to play the scene big. I think that it's really interesting with this character who's playing a barbarian, and does the berserker rage thing during the course of the movie, but it's not like huge and ridiculous and absurd. It's just like, oh, she gets really angry, and you can tell she's stronger now. And that's it. It downplays it. So like she recognizes that she just has this presence in this movie, and sometimes just that presence is enough. And so we don't need her to say the thing or say the thing big. She just has to be there. And it really works. Like I think that's part of the reason why the opening of the movie is so great, because for so much of it she's just sitting there silently eating while he's doing his thing, and her presence is felt in that scene anyway.
Yeah,
it was really efficient storytelling, the whole like setting, because there was actually quite a bit of backstory to convey about like Chris Pine's relationship to his daughter and his wife dying, and his relationship to Holga and all that. And they did it really efficiently through like the storytelling at the like hearing in the prison, and like through just like little scenes between Holga and him and stuff. It was a perfect way to do sort of exposition.
I know that we've talked about that scene a lot, but my favorite part of the whole scene is that they were going to pardon him anyway.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about how much I enjoy the action for its own sake. It reminded me of my favorite like Indiana Jones or something, where it's like it's got this momentum to it, and it's inventive, and things change from moment to moment in a way that's fun and dynamic and funny. And like the fights that Holga would get into, it was always just this like whirlwind of creativity, where it's like she's going to take that guy's shield and use it to block this, and then bash that guy in the face, and then like just like this, and it was like almost like Jackie Chan-esque like flow.
Clearly took the tavern brawler feat.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. But like that, except sort of across the whole movie, where we're moving from set piece to set piece and concept to concept, and it's always clever and fun. And I mean, even just like when they kind of they catch the druid spying in the form of a fly, and she has to escape. It's literally just her like running. And it's incredibly fun because she's like constantly almost getting caught, and like I think that's actually important for this character, because there's a danger that she sort of becomes this like badass figure where it's like she's untouchable and thus there's no sense of stakes or drama. But that whole scene, I think, establishes, first of all, it's incredibly entertaining, and then it also establishes like, okay, well, she's not invulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, that was my favorite action sequence of the movie. Like the second you started talking about action, that was the one I first thought of, was her escaping. I thought that was wonderfully well done. It's perfectly tense all throughout. Like you feel that she's in danger. You wonder at any moment, is she about to get caught? And you could see a version of the film in which she is caught in that escape, and then they have to go rescue her, and the movie could pivot from there. And it doesn't, but it feels like it, and that's what makes the sequence work.
Totally.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, I wasn't in love with like every single sequence, but I thought it was good. Like that's my overall feeling on this movie is it's good. It's a good movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I had a lot of fun with it. I don't think I would put it on my top 7 movies of all time list.
Name 6 movies better than this one.
I'm not gonna play in your game, Michael.
You can't even think of one.
You can't. No. No. I'm thinking about the So like I was gonna say like one action sequence that is like not my favorite action sequence is the whole thing with the big fat dragon. But then I'm like, well, I didn't like dislike it. It's just like it's kind of a side quest, and you kind of want them to just get on with it. And then I thought like, well, I think they knew that, and that's why they made it basically a comedic moment instead of a tense moment, because it's a big fat dragon. How scared can you possibly be? It's basically just entertaining you with the humor of the situation, and the I don't know, just yeah, clever.
Yeah, there was some fun problem solving there with the staff and that stuff and how they ended up escaping. But,
yeah,
that felt very D&D-esque.
Yeah, I guess like if I had to come up with a complaint of this movie, I did feel that the ending where like suddenly they're in the games and they're just kind of thrown in there, that felt a little, oh, we're moving a bit too fast for me here.
It was the perfect pacing. Their heist seemed like it was going perfectly. They realized that they weren't where they thought they were. Each one of them got picked off one by one. You thought the heroes were at the lowest point. You think that Chris Pine finds his daughter, but actually it was the witch all along. And then they're placed in a death game, in a tournament arc.
Yeah, but I feel like totally everything you said I agree with, and it's at that point that we get to, and then they're placed in the death game. That was something that was only kind of mentioned at the side. We didn't understand much of it at all, actually.
And you're like,
and I was like,
awesome.
Wait, hold on, what's happening here? And then like things are rising up and down, and I'm not clear what the goal is. Like, is the goal to just get into the cage at the end?
It felt very natural as a dungeon master that there would be such a death game. Just on hand.
I think the idea of having a game like that, yes, felt very D&D. I totally agree with you. I just felt like it all played out like very, very quickly for me. And I was like, oh, okay.
And then they had to go into the slime. That was great.
Yeah.
I thought that was a fun trick. Yeah.
That was, because at first I just thought that the gelatinous cube was going to be like, oh, it's a gelatinous cube. Recognize that humor.
But it was integral to the story.
Then it actually becomes a plot relevant gelatinous cube, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say.
Did you recognize really the best kind of gelatinous cube?
Yeah.
Did you recognize, well, first of all, the displacer beasts that were chasing them, but second of all, that the other party that was in the death game with them were the characters from the 80s cartoon?
I did not.
No, but I did see their costumes, and I was like, "That's got to be a reference to something," because
it looks familiar. I didn't really watch the '80s cartoon, but I remember it being on like around the time Ninja Turtles was, and I would occasionally watch it.
Well, to me, the joke there was like, "Oh, it's a whole different party of adventurers that are almost certainly going to be killed gruesomely for comedic effect, in contrast to our party." Which is what indeed happened. So I was happy with that. I see. Here's one thing. I don't know if this is like a complaint or if this is just me being too old, but like it was pretty immediately obvious to me that the idea was like, oh, the Red Wizard wants to like whatever Hugh Grant wants doesn't matter. What she wants is to use her spell to possess the whole city and turn them into an undead army. That's pretty obvious, like from the moment that plot element was introduced. And so the fact that it sort of held out as a twist, I was like, yeah, I got that. But I don't
feel like it was really meant to be a super surprising twist. I mean, like obviously Hugh Grant's character was not aware that he was being, like it was clear he was being manipulated from the beginning. And he clearly was too foppish to be aware of that. So you knew who the real villain was the whole time.
Yeah, I agree, but like I do think the movie does kind of hold it out as like what could she possibly be planning? And it's like, oh, she's gonna do that thing that we saw the other one did in the past.
It's fine. I should
I
ask my
liked
kids
the-
if they were surprised by it, actually, because maybe it's a perfectly good twist if you haven't watched 1,000 movies.
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, like you know, like we said, it's not trying to be like super clever and like, you know, pull one over on you. It's
Mhm.
just like, yeah, this is a predictable twist, but it's a twist and maybe one that you expect, but like it's a twist that works in the structure of the movie, and it's like what needed to happen. Obviously Hugh Grant wasn't going to be the big bad, and the witch was built up to, you know, be planning something, and it was set up with the one guy's backstory that, you know, this is the sort of thing that the red wizards do, et cetera, et cetera. So it all makes sense.
Mhm.
I liked the scene though where she heats up the tea, or she cools down the tea for Hugh Grant, and then he just
Didn't
sets
realize
it
you were going to
down.
put
I
your
didn't
whole
realize you were going to put your
finger
finger in it. It was great.
Very, very good writing there. These guys, I wasn't remembering what else they did. John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. They also did a movie called Game Night, a few years ago, which is like one of the funniest big studio comedy films I've seen in recent years. Like it's
Yeah.
just very, very good. So if you guys like this, I would check out Game Night. It's very good.
Yeah, I like comedy. I feel like comedy isn't really paid attention to these days, and it should be valued more.
Yeah. They don't make them anymore.
Well,
they
yeah,
stopped
or they're
making
just
comedies
kind of
altogether.
they're just kind of lazy with them, or yeah, in general they don't make them that much anymore. They just kind of the predominant humor is what we were talking about with like quip humor, which is not really humor. It needs to be like situational to be good humor.
They make comedies all the time, guys. All the time.
I've never
Comedies
heard of one.
That might be a nice segue to the other topic you wanted to discuss, because Ted Lasso is also another good example of a good comedy. At least,
well,
the
let's
first
make
couple
sure
seasons.
we're done with Dungeons and Dragons first. Does anything have anything else they want to say?
Well, just in summary, it's one of the 7 great movies, and I'll
Can
have to
we-
let it sit for like a year before I can really rank it relative to the other 7 great movies. But currently, it's pretty far up there.
Can we, for our audience and frankly me, can we have a refresher on what the 7 great movies are?
Yeah, I've never told you.
Yeah, but we know some of them for sure, right?
Yeah, we've definitely talked about some of them on the podcast. Like we did In Bruges.
Yeah,
think,
and I knew
we
that was
did-
one of them.
We did
Monkeys
The
on there?
Prestige is
Prestige, I
one of them.
think. Yeah. Do you have any other guesses?
Is
Did
12 Monkeys
Jumanji
on
make
there?
that list?
No, it didn't. Although it does have a soft place in my heart.
Mm-hmm. So now we got Dungeons and Dragons is on here. I don't
12
know. I don't know.
Monkeys.
Yeah, 12
Matt,
Monkeys is on there.
Oh, okay. 12 Monkeys. That's 4.
Yeah. And Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Really? Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the most perfectly crafted movies of all time. Despite
Such
Guy Ritchie being a massive tool.
yeah.
Princess Bride. It's on
Okay.
there.
That
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay.
And Live, Die, Repeat, which we also talked about.
Oh, well, there we go. There's the 7.
Wait,
There's the
what
7 great movies.
was the one I missed in my list that I wrote down while you were talking?
It's too late now. You'll have to listen to
We
it
can't
again.
go over them again. That's terrible audio.
No. It's if only someone had recorded this conversation. You're right. Okay, I'm good. We're good.
All right. There we go. So we've got the 7.
Have we talked about? I don't think we've talked about all of them on the podcast. We haven't talked about Lock, Stock, have we?
We have not talked about Lock, Stock. I don't believe we've talked about. I'm trying to think.
Whatever that one was that you said that I didn't write down. I don't think we talked about. I don't remember if we talked about 12 Monkeys either. Actually,
I mean, we've talked. Yeah, we've talked
we
about
did.
12 Monkeys for sure.
Okay.
It might have been
I don't know
a
if
long time
we've
ago.
done an episode on Princess Bride, but I don't think you were there, Michael.
Yeah, I know. That offended me, by the way.
I didn't know it was on your list of the 7 greatest movies of all time. I'm sorry.
It is. It's also another movie that doesn't try to be too pretentious, but is just perfect in all of the ways it does everything.
You have like a very low line of pretension. Like your pretension sensors are very,
it's a very sensitive pretension
sensitive.
meter.
Yeah. Some would
I
say
also liked that one. I also liked that one movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
you can't just say that.
No, I've forgotten. I've forgotten both the name and also who the main actor was. So it's really
So you
gonna make
clearly
it hard.
liked it a whole bunch.
Like a premise?
No, it's not
or,
on the list, but it was a movie that I was surprised that I liked in college.
Any information about it other than that?
Anything?
No, that's it. Moving on.
Great. All right, so that is Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Amongst Thieves. It's in theaters now, so if you haven't seen it and you listen to this entire conversation, sorry we kind of ruined it for you, but you should go watch it. I think
You'll still
Yeah, you
enjoy it.
probably should have turned off the podcast like 40 minutes ago if that was
Yeah.
the case.
I doubt most people out there are going to leave the movie saying this is one of the 7 best movies ever made, but I think they will leave.
You're wrong. I think you're wrong.
Leave.
I think you've spent too much time surrounded by your Criterion collection and your study of mahogany wood and leather seating, and you've forgotten the connection to the common man who just thinks the Dungeons and Dragons movie is the best movie of all time.
There is 0 mahogany in this room, and I have a Superman poster right next to me.
It's
on the
a
wall,
metaphorical mahogany.
I see. Okay.
I know you own several Criterion Collection Blu-rays.
I do. They're very good movies.
Yeah, except for most of them.
Better than this movie.
Are any of the movies on my list in the Criterion Collection?
I don't know.
I
The
don't
Princess
think so.
Bride is. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. And I think that might be it.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Maybe one day Live, Die, Repeat can get into the Criterion Collection.
I hope so.
I don't think so. It's a good movie, though. I really like that movie.
It is a good movie.
All the movies that you call your favorite movies are movies I quite enjoy myself.
That's why they're the 7 good movies, Scott, because no one dislikes those movies. Do 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 do.
Okay, sure. Michael, let's talk about Ted Lasso a little bit here.
Yeah.
So, Matt, you have not seen Ted Lasso itself, but I think we're going to start talking about this specifically, and then we'll branch out to talking about television in general a little bit here. So, Michael, you've only seen the first 2 seasons of this show, correct?
I've seen the first 2 seasons, which are the canonical seasons.
No, they're all canonical seasons.
I don't know if the most recent one is considered canon yet.
It's written. What?
But Ted Lasso is a good show because there hasn't been a good comedy, a good like 30-minute comedy. It is 30 minutes long, right? I don't even know how long shows are anymore because they stream, but it feels like it's like a 30-minute comedy in the vein of like Parks and Recreation or something like that. That they just don't really do anymore. And it was very refreshing and it was very wholesome. And as a fellow, Midwestern Southern American who went overseas in a strange land, it was a relatable humor. And then what I noticed in the second season was that they were already getting too serious. And they were like giving Ted Lasso panic attacks and stuff. And I was like, that's fine. Just don't forget that you're a comedy. And now what I've heard, and you can tell me if this is true in the most recent season, is that they really now abandoned the comedy and tried to become way more serious.
Well, it's a comedy drama, and it always was from the very beginning.
It was not. It definitely was not a comedy drama.
Yes, it absolutely was.
It was definitely not a comedy drama.
No, that's completely wrong.
There was this great joke where the owner was like, "How do you take your tea, Mr. Lasso?" And he was like, "Well, usually right back to the counter because someone's made a horrible mistake." And that was a great joke, and I laughed. And
just because something has jokes in it doesn't mean it can't also have character drama.
Very rarely do I laugh at a show, Scott. Very rarely do I laugh at a joke in a show. This time just made me chuckle out loud.
No, so obviously this is a show that it came out in 2020. in the middle of the pandemic, and it was a feel good show. It was very funny. It was also, you know, it made you feel good about people. Ted Lasso is a character in the show that is like the type of person that is just a good person. That like, you know, the whole concept of the show is he's this American that comes to coach European football, doesn't know anything about it, but just his presence energizes and changes this team. And so it was very wholesome thing that a lot of people enjoyed to watch. The second season was very good as well. I so I am struggling with the third season. I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's bad because they're leaning into the drama more. That's not why it's bad. I think it's also still a very funny show. It feels to me, and this is kind of maybe the way I wanted this conversation to go, is it feels to me like they called this the third and final season of Ted Lasso. It's ending after the season. And it feels to me that they just kind of went, okay, let's throw every idea we had for the show in it all at the same time. Every idea we had, we're going to throw it in. And I can't follow what the show is doing. I just don't understand episode to episode like what they're trying to say, what they're trying to do, where characters are moving to. What does that mean? It just feels very disjointed and weird to me. You said it was a 30-minute show. You were right. Not anymore. All of the season 3 episodes have been 45 minutes to an hour long.
It's always a mistake.
And it feels to me like a show that's very confused, or rather the writers were just like, okay, this is it. We've got 10, 12 episodes. Let's get it all in. Let's do it.
Or maybe they just ran out of jokes.
There's plot lines that they introduce that just like don't go. It's not just that they don't go the way you would expect them to go, but they just don't go anywhere. And then they just end. And you're like, oh, okay. Now we're going to switch to this. It just feels very disjointed and weird. I struggle with it a lot. I'm still watching it because I really like all these characters. I'm really invested in Ted Lasso. I'm really invested in Nate and his villain arc that was started in the second season and where it's going from there. Every one of the characters I think is just really,
I enjoy
really,
Roy Kent.
Yeah, Roy Kent is great. Jamie Tart is going through some stuff in this season and I think is making him a lot more likable too. I think it's just really interesting to me that they seem like I don't know where the decision was made or how the decision was made that this was going to be the last season. I think it's probably a correct decision because there's only so far you can take this concept before it just kind of dries up. But it feels like maybe they should have, instead of just throwing every idea at it, like come up with a central idea of what the season is going to represent. Because I mean, in season 2, Ted Lasso's having his panic attack stuff, and that plot line is, you know, continuing through. But like right now, episode 7 just came out a couple days ago. I think there are 12, so we've got 5 episodes left to go. I have no idea what the show is saying right now. I don't like. Yeah. I have no idea where it's going to go. I have no like. Is this like the good central question is this the show in which they win the Premier League at the end of it, right? Or is this the show in which they lose, get relegated, but learn something valuable about ourselves along the way?
Yeah, I feel like the right ending for the series would be that they just win because it's like a feel-good series. But I feel like what they'll do instead, because they've, you know, this is what's happened when you get corrupted by pretension, Scott, is they've started to be like, what's everyone expect to happen? And how can we subvert that? And everyone obviously expects them to like win in the end. And what they'll do instead is just make them lose. And then, Ted Lasso will be sitting at his like little, apartment counter and like get his open jar of peanut butter that he sticks his finger in to enjoy a nice snack in a frivolous way. And then just look at it and realize that it's empty now and it's meaningless. And all of this was meaningless. And he was just running from his family. And then he'll pull out a drawer and there'll be a gun in the drawer. And he'll pull it to his temple and he'll think, and then the show will end before we know whether he shoots himself. And then everyone will think, what a deep show, what a deep and meaningful show that has really made me more cultured. And it was right. There is nothing joyful in this world, nothing that matters. And then people will move on to the next thing.
Wow. Okay. Sure.
I think that's what's going to happen.
You have a very fascinating view on entertainment and the content that people create.
I
Very
do, but
fascinating.
it's just so it's miraculous the clarity with which I see the world, Scott.
No, incorrect. The reason this is so fascinating to me is because I think there are 3 incredibly popular shows that are coming to an end all right at the same time. You know, we have Ted Lasso; it's approaching its end. We have 2 HBO shows that are incredibly popular and adored. We have the show Succession,
Wait, what are
and
the
then
two
the show
HBO shows?
Succession and
Oh,
Barry are their
you were
names.
about to list
Yeah,
them. Go on.
yeah. Succession is probably one of my favorite shows in the last 10 years. Honestly, I wasn't. It's I think this is its 5th and final season. I just kind of caught up to it over the last year. I was
Is
not
that the
watching it
one?
live.
Is that the one with Queen Elizabeth?
No. Succession is about, it's basically like a loose analogy for Rupert Murdoch and Fox News. Like it's an
Okay.
incredibly rich old man who owns a huge corporate conglomerate and his awful piece of shit children that want to take over the company from him. But it is just some of the sharpest, most wonderful writing I've experienced in TV in the last few years. And the thing that I love so much about the show as it's coming to its end, you know, I think this is the 4th season, actually, now that I think of it. They announced at the beginning of the season that this season would be the last, and it's so like universally loved that there was a lot of people out there like angry about this. It's like, why are we ending this? Why are we doing this? And I'm just like, good. This is right. And what I love about what the show is doing is we're about halfway through this final season of this show, and it feels like everything is coming together perfectly. It feels like it is the perfect culmination of what the show was always going to be from the first episode. And so it's really fun for me to look at a show like Succession and see that like perfect culmination is this is where everything was leading. And it's not necessarily that they planned and plotted this all out from the beginning. It's just that once they recognized that this was going to be the end, then it was like, okay, let's shift our gears towards our end game and perhaps our original outline. And then you have Ted Lasso, which I feel like doesn't know what its end game is and is just kind of throwing everything at it and in just this wild way. And then you have the 3rd show, Barry, which is also an HBO show that I quite like a lot. And that's final season is just kind of veering off a different direction that I just didn't expect at all. And it's just really fascinating to me to kind of step back from these 3 shows all ending at the same time and look at the different ways in which, you know, creatives choose to end their thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or sort of are forced to. I mean, I'm going to interject here, just like knowing nothing about any of the things you're talking about. It's like if you had a really good idea or concept or premise, and then you were really successful, and now you're just got to make another season. Okay, now it's time to wrap it up. You didn't necessarily have a good idea for an ending in mind just because you had a good idea for a premise or a show in mind. And there's really no guarantee that it's going to conclude satisfyingly.
Yeah, like for instance, Game of Thrones, like obviously didn't know how it was going to end because, you know, George R. R. Martin hasn't written those books yet. And I kind of felt like then the last couple seasons of that show also were just like, we don't really know what the right ending is here.
Yeah, but it's pretty fascinating that I think all 3 of these shows that I was just talking about are all choosing to end. Like it's not the network saying we're done, we don't want any more seasons, wrap it up and be done.
Yeah, but are they or like I don't know any of the details here, but is it just like that who's the main actor in Ted Lasso? What's that guy's name?
That is, I wanted to say Bill Hader, but it's not Bill Hader.
No, it's
the
not
other
Bill Hader.
SNL
It's the other one.
Bill Hader's in Barry is why I was thinking of it.
Oh, okay. But anyway, like, is it not just something like, yeah, Jason Sudeikis, is he not just like, yeah, I'm kind of tired of this, I'm not going to play this character anymore, and then they're like, oh crap, we better end it then because without you, this can't be the show Ted Lasso.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I don't know. Like I know with Succession, like everyone kind of collectively decided that they were going to be done, except for HBO. Like I know HBO would have them make that show forever if they could, because it's very popular and very well received. But with Ted Lasso, I don't know the details of why they decided this would be the final.
I assume
season.
It's the same. I'm sure Apple wants them to make more.
I'm sure they would. Yeah, it's incredibly popular. Well, actually, that's an interesting little tidbit. Actually, is Ted Lasso was incredibly popular. It feels like nobody's talking about this third season right now. And I don't know if that's just because people aren't enjoying it. Because like I said, I don't think it's very good. But it just feels like the thing I remember about Ted Lasso is that the internet kind of got Ted Lasso fever in that first season, where everyone was shocked and surprised about how funny the show was and how it made you feel, and they were just talking about it constantly. And this season it's been like crickets. It's really, really strange.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, like no one discusses TV shows in my life anymore. So it's hard to gauge what is being talked about and what isn't. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say that like my view of the internet is cultivated and manicured, so I'm not seeing the pure like unvarnished
yeah,
conversation, but I try to stay pretty plugged into what
in like
what
I
people are
assume in
talking
like
about.
the kind of critic sphere, it's just like there's not that much more to talk about probably after.
Yeah, I mean,
It was a good
I guess one thing
idea.
I expected is more people talking about why it's bad, actually, and I
Oh,
think
maybe.
I think from the one thing I've seen critics mention of it is just like that it's not very good. But I expected more conversations about like what happened to the show. Why does it feel like it
Is that
jumped the
is
shark a little bit?
is that common though in this day and age? I mean, obviously a lot of people complain about Game of Thrones because it was just like one of the most massive
Yeah.
cultural things in a long time. But I feel like most shows now are like disposable, and you kind of expect them to expire at some point, and then you just throw them away and move on, and you don't bother complaining about it because it's like, well, it never meant that much to me to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Um,
the honest truth is there's just so much fucking TV on right now that
yeah,
like the people that are creating content about talking about TV have like 7 other shows to
right.
watch that are
Yeah,
they're enjoying more. So why, spend a lot of time talking about the stuff that they're not liking when they can be glowingly talking up the stuff that they're really, really loving. So,
totally.
I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but you think about like how a show like Breaking Bad or The Sopranos or whatever, like they are sort of crowned forever in everyone's mind as
mhm.
art for all time, and a big part of that is they ended and they ended well.
Yeah,
And then in contrast, like Game of Thrones, the way that ended basically ruined those guys' career. And so if you're the showrunner or if you're any sort of leadership position running these shows or close to the leadership, there is kind of an incentive pushing you toward like, all right, let's end this well while we're on the up, while people still
Mhm.
like us, and bring it home. And then people will always think, oh yeah, Ted Lasso, I love that show. And they won't think, oh yeah, Ted Lasso, the first 2 seasons were all right, but man, that went downhill, right?
it's true. The ending does matter a lot. I
Yeah.
can think of a
No.
ton of shows. I mean, like Dexter was pretty
Mhm.
critically acclaimed, and it ended really badly, and no one really talks about it anymore. Lost, you can't really say the ending of Lost was its failure. It was more like the whole ending, which was like every season after the first or second. It was kind of a
Well, Lost is an interesting example because it is one of the shows that like originally the network said you have to keep making this forever, and they
yeah,
said okay, and then so they kind of shifted gears into this
right,
long-term planning mode, but then eventually they like went to the studio and were like, we can't do this anymore, we need to end it, you have to let us end it. And
yeah.
that was the last few seasons,
Yeah,
and
it's
so
true. That was like the first, because before that, your listeners will be too young to remember, but before Lost, there was only like Law and Order and shows that had a certain formula where they like could go on indefinitely, and it didn't matter because there were like tiny little ongoing plot lines with like the
yeah.
lawyers and the cops, but not really. Um, so it could just go on forever. But Lost was like the first one that tried to tell a grander story, and the network was like confused about like, what do you mean it can't go on forever? And they're like,
Yeah.
no, it hasn't. It has a story. It has characters that have an end. And then they're like, no, make it work.
But I mean, it's interesting that they won that argument with the studio ultimately because
Well, but
they
after like
like,
7 seasons, that it
yeah.
was it
But
was
I
it was
think
already waning in population by that in
I think it was
popularity by
like
that.
mid fifth season where they said no, we're doing this and ending it, and that's I think when actually don't know, I don't remember how many seasons Lost was actually,
I think there
but
were
I know
seven.
the last few seasons were shorter, right? They're like, we can't do 22 episode seasons anymore. We can't do this. We need to end the show, and we don't.
Yeah.
The story we have left to tell is not going to fill
There-
that many episodes, and they
There were
won.
six seasons. 6 seasons.
Okay, yeah.
Huh.
I love Lost more than both of you, despite all its faults.
I mean,
but
yeah, I'm in the middle. I don't hate it as much as Matt does. I really liked the first season, and
Yeah,
the second season was okay, and then I kind of lost. I got tired of the being led around.
yeah, I mean, I really like the ending, and I think you're right. The first season is like a work of art, and it's just
Yeah.
really fantastic television. I do think that the worst part of the show is that middle period where they're just like, all
Yeah.
right, we can't advance any of these plots more than an inch a year because we don't know when we're gonna end this thing, and so they just kind of get stuck a little bit.
Well, my problem was that they took certain characters like Saeed, and they just were like, we're gonna run away. Let's just change fundamental things about who this character
totally.
is.
Yeah. No, they were all perfectly characterized in the first season, and then they all changed in weird ways, and not like because the island corrupted them, but like because they revealed like a second arc of their backstory where they were a completely different person.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with long form storytelling in general, and I think it raises its ugly head in different types of shows differently. Like in sitcoms, like those 30-second or 30-minute, just comedies you were talking about, Michael. Like as those shows go on longer and longer, the people in them become less human and just more absurd caricature, and it's just because they run out of things for them to do. And in trying to, I mean, like look at like
I think in a lot of the
Friends,
best comedies. Yeah,
like,
well, I don't know about. Yeah, I don't know about Friends. That honestly hasn't like really like kept esteem in my view. But like Parks and Rec is one of my favorite comedies, and I feel like in that show, the characters maybe even started off more as caricatures and then like became deeper people, but in a natural way that wasn't like we need to make up some new arc.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I think I love Parks and Rec. I think it's very good. I also think it's a very different kind of show from the shows I was thinking of, like Friends. But I think like The Office gets more caricature-y. I think it's just like you run out of things to do, and you need the best type of storytelling is the type of storytelling where character drives plot, right? You need your character's wants and needs are driving what the plot of the show is, and eventually you run out of stuff to do, and you start doing this thing where you're saying, okay, plot is driving character. And that is almost never good. And I think that's what happened to Lost with some of the characters. And I think that's what happens with a lot of shows that run for a very long time.
Did you remember that Michelle Rodriguez was in Lost?
I did. Yeah. She played the cop that doesn't she shoot? She kills someone.
Yeah. She murders somebody. And then that's her thing that she's running from. She murders somebody who did something
she gets murdered. No, Michael
she gets murdered by Michael.
But she does murder someone, though.
You're thinking
she murders someone in the flashback, but Michael murders her on the island. Yes.
What's her face? Kate. Kate murders someone in her backstory.
Yeah, Kate murders her abusive stepfather. I don't know.
Everybody murders somebody.
Yeah, and then season 2, everyone just like lures people into the woods and hits them over the head, and then does something sinister for no apparent reason.
Yeah. No, the reason is because they had bad fathers. That's the reason for everything.
Oh yeah,
in Lost is they had bad dads.
They do all have
because
bad
Damon
dads.
Lindelof has an issue with his father.
Did you know Seinfeld ended at the height of its popularity too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
I kind of missed that when Seinfeld was. I remember when it ended. It was kind of a big deal, but I was like too young to really appreciate the humor of Seinfeld at the time.
Yeah. I remember people universally hating that series finale episode.
With the prison where they go to jail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even as
I thought it was
I remember
hilarious.
that too.
I thought it was so funny, and people hated it.
I don't know what I think they didn't understand what the show was, but that's nothing new, really.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to say about TV? I think that was a great conversation.
Yeah.
TV's dead.
It's the exact opposite.
Film is dead. TV's dead. Yeah. Good talk.
I mean,
It's
I
all
think
about 20-second tickety talks now.
I mean, you joke, but like CinemaCon happened this week, and there's a lot of movie news out there right now, and so much of it is just absolutely depressing.
Yeah.
Uh, like,
Well,
we're-
I mean, like I'm not really joking. I mean, like TV's not dead yet. People still watch TV shows, but I do, like 10 years ago, there was a sentiment that probably I shared, which was like movies are so long. I don't have time for movies. I just want to watch like a 30-minute show. And now it's like I don't want to watch a 30-minute show. It takes forever. I just want to watch a YouTube video or a TikTok.
Yeah, Quibi was just early, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I mean, I think the binge model is still working rather well for a lot of these television shows. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I think it's like with the older audience. It's like with us millennials. It's not.
well, I mean, I think it is absolutely true that like television, well, I mean, movies especially is not the center of popular culture anymore. That is 100% true.
Yeah.
That like movies, like in the 90s, it was movies. That's what it was, and
Yeah.
that's just not true anymore. Absolutely, and I think I think we're in a really interesting time with TV where we've had just this content overload, and that is going to scale back because studios are like, oh wait, we're not making any money off of all this money we're spending, and so they're going to start scaling back, and we'll see less content in general in the world of streaming and television. I don't know what that's going to look like. Matt and I have talked about this whole lot.
It's gone
but
through eras because, like, I feel like the mid 2000s to late 2000s was like, or like early 2010s was like the golden age of like network television / cable television, and then when Netflix got popular, there was like this streaming boom where there was all these new shows. Like the streaming really like let people tell stories in a different way.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of really great shows there for a while, and now I think it's just so saturated, and they just all have to make so many of them to compete, and a lot of them feel like they've become cheapened.
Yeah, well, and to Matt's point that he makes over and over again on this show is like, I don't understand how these things actually make any money. Like, how do you spend $1 billion on a Lord of the Rings television show and that return its investment? I don't understand.
They spent
the business
$1 billion on that show.
Yeah.
And
oh my God.
between acquiring the rights and the cost of production, yes, they spent $1 billion.
I wasn't going to repeat myself again, but yes, it's like you're not going to get $1 billion worth of new subscribers for it. So it's it's certainly
especially Amazon, because doesn't everyone just like get Amazon Prime so they can have like 2-day delivery or whatever? Like,
correct.
Well, I mean, the thing that Amazon has going for it is that it has more money than God. The only person that has more money than Amazon is Apple, and so both of these companies, like, I don't know. I don't know what their model is, because Apple's really interesting, right? Because Apple could make negative $100 million from its streaming service every year and be fine because they're making so much money in everything else. And it's like, well, like what is their success story in streaming? Like, what do they want?
It's just the attention economy. They want people to pay attention to them, and like that'll pay off later somehow. But,
sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's basically true, is that the Rings of Power is an advertisement for Amazon more than Amazon.
Honestly, like, even though, I mean, I don't know how you guys have talked about it, I feel like it was pretty widely lambasted. But
we liked it, and we got some of the most angry negative comments we've ever gotten because we said we liked it. I
was gonna say, but that's like good advertising for them, because everyone's talking about how bad it is, which is still good. People are still talking about it.
12-dimensional chess yet again from Bezos.
And now it'll be a game of like, oh, they're doing another thing. I wonder how bad they'll ruin that. Hey, everyone, let's watch that show, and then we can complain about it on message boards.
Here we come, Amazon's Dark Tower. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Are they doing a Dark Tower?
Not necessarily.
Not yet.
There's God, what's his name? What? Matt. Why am I blanking on his name?
I don't know who you're
David Lindelof?
No.
Stephen King.
Oh my God. No.
Mike
Flanagan. Thank you.
Mike Flanagan.
Mike Flanagan acquired the rights to Dark Tower, and he also signed an exclusivity deal with Amazon at like the same time. But those two deals are separate from each other, and so
what has Mike Flanagan done?
He's done a lot of the Netflix TV shows, House on Haunted Hill,
Okay.
He's-
the Haunting of Bly Manor,
He did Doctor Sleep,
Doctor Sleep.
which I really liked.
Yeah, he's a really good horror director. We like him a whole bunch. But he's also really into Stephen King stuff, and he got Dark Tower rights, so that's very exciting in the Stephen King world. But it doesn't have a home yet.
Well, he co-opted you guys. I know you guys are trying to buy the rights to the Dark Tower.
I know. We put up a bid of $5, and unfortunately rejected.
Yeah, I'm also excited about the next Wheel of Time season, so that we can all hate on that. Like,
that was universally hated too, right?
Was that Amazon too?
It was. Yeah.
So that totally is their business model. Like, I don't think I'm even joking.
Just buying up fantasy that everyone will tell them was garbage, even if it's actually pretty watchable.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's like, honestly, like, it's like, okay, we need to get people to talk about Amazon Prime Video ideas. Okay, all we have to do is take a nerd culture and take something cherished to them, and then pervert it somehow in a way that'll really annoy them.
Well, they just produced the Michael Jordan Shoes movie. It was written by Ben Affleck and directed by Affleck. It had Damon in it.
Cool. That's what people have been clamoring for, is a movie about unfettered capitalism.
It's supposed to be a really good movie, actually, but I do think it's funny that it's like the whole like dramatic arc of the film is like, are they going to sign Michael Jordan to Nike?
I don't know.
The stakes couldn't be lower.
Oh God.
I'm sure it's good because of the like sharp written, well performed dialogue.
I'm sure it's just some sort of ploy for a biopic to try to get someone a Best Actor nomination.
I don't think so. I don't think that's what Affleck and Damon do. Not at least not at this stage in their career.
Yeah, maybe.
Those are guys that like really like want to see the industry succeed and want to do well. Like they started their own production company to try to bring back these lower budget films that have kind of disappeared from the market and try to help those type of movies get made.
I do enjoy those guys. They had, low enough self-respect to humiliate themselves in like the Jay and Silent Bob movies and so forth. How pretentious can they be?
Yeah.
I don't like those apples, Will. What are we gonna do?
They're actually heroes.
Yeah. Michael, you should watch The Last Duel, which is a Ridley Scott movie that had both of them in it. That I think is
just
really
so
good
serious.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Do you only watch comedies now?
Also, I don't have time to watch an hour and a half movie.
Oh well, bad news.
I got some bad news for you.
How long is it? 2 hours?
2.5, I think.
Oh my God! Yeah,
Ridley Scott cannot make a movie under 2 hours and 15 minutes. Is what we realized.
I think our comment was basically it should have been a 3-part miniseries. It would have actually broken into a 3-part miniseries very cleanly.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, it's. I don't have the.
So just watch it over 3 days as a TV show.
Yeah.
Drama is the laziest form of art. Anyone can feel serious. That's just like people's default emotion.
I feel like this is a great place to end the podcast.
But comedy is the real artistic medium.
Speaking of comedy, John Mulaney just released his new comedy special on Netflix, and it's wonderful. Everyone should listen to it.
Okay, I will. I love comedy.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't think you're gonna.
Why don't you believe us?
Because
I can, but I don't have to actually watch comedy. I can just
I listen to comedy on road trips.
Yeah,
you should. So like what John Mulaney went through the last couple of years, right? That he went to rehab and divorced his wife and all this shit.
Very off-brand behavior.
I don't keep track of people's personal lives.
Well, that's kind of what the special is about how like him trying to redefine what his image is like, and he doesn't like go back to like, I want to go back to being the likable guy. He's like admitting that he was a piece of shit that was addicted to cocaine, and he like is very candid about the type of shit he got up to when he was.
Is this like season 2 of Ted Lasso all over again, where he's trying to be serious?
No, it's a stand-up comedy special. He's telling jokes. One of the jokes he tells is about how he made a rule with his account manager that he couldn't take any cash out of his bank account without his account manager's permission because he couldn't control his desire to buy cocaine.
Yeah, see, that's not funny.
No, but he obviously, I'm not a comedian. I'm not telling it as a joke, but then he tells the story about how he came up with a way of circumventing a rule that he created by going and buying a $12,000 Rolex and then pawning it at a pawn shop for $6,000 in order to get cash to buy drugs. And it's really fucking hilarious the way he tells the story.
When you tell it, it sounds really sad.
I am not a comedian, Michael.
I know, but you let in with this, with like, there's this really funny joke.
It's the way I'm not gonna recreate the joke for you. I'm just saying, like, that's an absurd situation in which he has to circumvent and find a way around a rule that he created. That it's a rule that he could just say, "I'm not doing that anymore."
I just think you're just being insensitive to the plight of this poor man who's
I'm sure
trying to tell a serious story.
He's really suffering. Yeah,
and you laughed at him.
It's a really good comedy special. It's on Netflix. You should check it out.
Okay.
All right, that's all we have for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Amongst Thieves, or gosh, any of the other things we talked about over the course of this hour and a half, feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or on Twitter @doofmedia.
Yeah,
or leave a voicemail on Scott's phone. His number is 9.
Don't do that.
Beep.
Don't do that.
Yeah, go ahead and subscribe. Let's wrap this up before Michael does anything else.
I did get a text message on my phone today that just said "hello" from a random number, and I was like, "Oh no, they found me."
Yeah, no, sorry, I gave them your number.
You can find this and all of our other shows at doofmedia.com. And if you want to support us, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating at any of the available levels there. We got a whole bunch of fun bonus content. I think Matt and I are going to record an episode where we decide what our next ongoing project, what would you call it, Matt? Series?
Series, I guess. Or
we're going to record like a bonus episode thing and release it on Patreon sometime within the next couple weeks. So subscribe and check that out.
Yeah, and we really haven't made up our mind, so we're going to be figuring it out on air. Yeah. All right. Please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That is right. Michael, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to yell at you in front of a microphone for an hour. So
you're welcome. I'm glad I could educate you on good movies and television shows.
Sure. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. I think we're going to do the movie that we had originally scheduled for this week, but then audibled when we decided it'd be fun to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. I think we're going to talk about Knock at the Cabin, the new M. Night Shyamalan film. So that'll be on next week's episode. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.